Now, as part of my 123 restoration, I want one key to be used for everything. Now, my wagon has one key for 5 different locks, which is infuriating. So I've ordered from the Classic Centre a passenger front door handle, or left side, you can see ending in 0759. I ordered the driver's or right side, which ends in 0859. They come with one key each. That's a tailgate lock, and I've done a separate video which I'd ask you to go and have a look at, because I've reprogrammed my tailgate lock already for the wagon to match this ignition tumbler, which was a new old stock off eBay. That came with 3 keys, which is exactly what I want. There's the driver's side with a single key. None of these keys matched up, and so they will no longer send you out the key for your car. This is where we're at. So this is the passenger side, and that's the provided key, which obviously fits. It unlocks, it locks, and then it springs to center. This is how they should operate. Now, on the end of that plastic tab for the key is the Huff code you will see later. That means essentially nothing anymore. You can't replicate that. There is my ignition tumbler key, which did not fit, and back to the provided key with the handle, which fits. So what I'm going to do is remove these 2 passenger door these 2 front locks, and program them effectively to fit my tumbler key. So that one key for the ignition tumbler will do everything. Now this is the passenger handle. I've marked the top side because I'm a bit silly and I don't like things getting mixed up. To start with, I need to remove the little locating pin on the top. You can see here, and I've just cut an Allen key in half so I could fit it in there and tap it through. Now the locating pin comes out, and then the larger pin, which actually fits into the door lock in the door and turns it, simply slides out. This is not overly complicated. If you are using an existing handle, there will be a lot of muck in there. You will need to degrease it. Now, there are actually 2 types of those larger pins you will see later on, which cause me some issues. So ideally, get on eBay, go to your wreckers and have a couple of sets of front handles for parts, and I'll explain that later if you have that luxury. I'm just marking the top of that pin, even though you can figure that out. So after you've removed the pin which goes into the door lock on the door, you simply remove the spring. Now the spring has 2 legs which are on opposite sides of those 2 teeth. One of those teeth is on the lock, one of them is on the handle. Both of those teeth need to be located when you put the lock back in. It is possible to have 180 degrees the wrong way, it won't work. Now a brand new lock comes out, it looks wonderful and clean. Your one will be covered in rubbish. It's got the rubber seal, which won't even probably exist on our old ones anymore. So the pins spring out because, or the leaves I'm going to call them, the leaves spring out because there is a small spring underneath them. There are 10 leaves for a front handle door lock, as opposed to a glove box which has only 6. Now it's the order of these 10 leaves, which are marked 1 to 4, they're stamped on them for the early ones, or 65 to 68 for the later ones, but it is the order of the leaves which determine if the key fits. Now if you are replicating a key from another lock, simply take that lock out, see what the sequence is, and the sequence could be any combination of the 10 1 to 4 leaves in order, write it down, and it's really easy just to copy that if you've got the combination of leaves available, or take them out of a rect unit, which is very easy to do, and then put them back in, and voila, you will have matching locks. Now, I knew what I wanted to copy because I've already done my tailgate lock and written down the sequence of the 10 leaves. Now, in this instance, I didn't actually have all 10 spare, so I needed to get them off another lock, and I've got a few spare ones having Rex and 123s in my process. Now, of note, the leaves on early cars were stamped 1 to 4. The later ones were stamped 65 to 68. They are analogous. That is, I'll show you how 1, I think, was 65, 2 was 66, 3 was 67, and 4 was 68. So if you open up a donor one and you've got like 67, don't stress. You'll be able to figure out which one that equates to, which I think is 3 off the top of my head, for example. So I am now putting the correct order of leaves into this passenger lock, and I haven't shown you on this video. Please watch the tailgate video, which will elaborate some, but you'll see how they're stamped up near those little jutting out teeth on these ones, what number they are. I know what order I'm putting them in there. I just need the correct combination. And when you put a key in there, those leaves have to be flush. The key will go in and you'll see, I'm going to push them down with a spring probably just to make sure the key goes through the slots. They need to be perfectly flush. If they're not, that is the wrong one and they do not fit in your handles. So you need to make it, you can see they're perfectly flush there when the key is in. Now this is an old lock, you can see completely covered in rubbish. And what I'm doing here is just cleaning these up. I'm going to pull out the 10 leaves. I'm also going to take the 10 springs out. And this task, I've got to say, is well within the ability of hobbyists like myself, and I would trust yourself with a bit of time and dedication. So I'm just actually going to degrease these, run them over the wire wheel, or polishing wheel, sorry, just so I can get all the crud off and actually read what the teeth are. So you can see that one is cleaned up a little bit. I can't actually see the stamp number on there, but trust me, it's on there. Now my lock, you can see with the key in, they're all flush so far, but I'm missing a few leaves which I just need to complete. To be honest, you don't actually need to put them all in there if you want to be lazy, but it just means some keys could probably operate your lock without full security. So that is in there. They are all beautifully flushed. All 10 leaves are in there. That is exactly how it is supposed to be. That is the ignition tumbler key. So I've effectively reprogrammed that lock. So I will now have a door handle which matches my ignition barrel. And I've done it for the passenger side to start with. So this was the new lock that I had, and I've reprogrammed it. I'm going to slide that back in there. Now you can see how the two teeth of that barrel now line up. Make sure it's not 180 degrees the wrong way around and the tooth is on the opposite side, otherwise it will not work. The spring has gone on. Simply flick the two legs of the spring onto the opposite side they want to be, and that's what gives it the tension to return it to where it's supposed to be. This is sounding more complicated than it actually is. It is not a difficult task. So I'm going to put back in the door lock pin. They only go in one way or they will not sit. And then I'm going to line up the little hole to put the securing pin in. Now that's actually, my spring is not all the way down. You can see the door lock is actually hanging out of the handle. It's not in far enough. That's better. So I need to push the spring down fully. I'm just going to locate the little holes by putting a screwdriver through it. And it doesn't turn backwards at this point. There's an error because I haven't pushed the spring all the way down to the base to enable that big door lock pin to go down all the way. So that's my problem here. So what I did is just take the screwdriver out, push the spring down, and you can see how the key on the untouched driver's one turns both ways. So I'm just going to take the screwdriver out, push the spring down all the way, and then that sat better and it worked appropriately. So after I've done that, I just tap that locating pin in there, crimp it down with a pair of pliers, and now this is the ignition barrel key. I'm turning forwards and backwards and successfully locking. It is springing into return. So this is the original key provided with the brand new handle. It no longer fits because it's not coded for that. It is now coded for the ignition barrel, which you can see that's what that key is. So I now successfully have a passenger door handle. Now I've come around to the driver's or right side. So there's the original key provided, and this key, which is turning and working as it should, is actually different to the other handle's key. I did not notice this at the time. The Classic Center has provided two different types of keys, not just individually, but actually different styles. And what this means is the internals of this lock are slightly different. So this burnt me and confused me a little bit, but there is a simple fix for this. Again, if you have some donor parts, life is going to be easier, but there are ways around this. So let's just duplicate what we just did. And this, once you've entered the matrix, you will understand what's going on here. So the locating pin comes out. The larger lock pin comes out, spring comes off, and we're going pretty quickly now because we know what to do. Now this is a different lock barrel to the other side. Now it doesn't look different off the bat. It's got 10 pin, it's got the rubber seal, but actually you can see the bit at the bottom of the screen where the securing pin goes in, that is a different dimension. It is slightly broader. So in addition to this, this must be the latest style. I've pulled these pins out, and these pins are not stamped 1 to 4 like every other one I've had to date. They are stamped effectively, I think 65, 67, 66 and 68, I'm sorry. If you can see there, 65. So this had me baffled, and I thought I was in real trouble here until I realized that they are all analogous. And 65, for example, equals 1, 66 equals 2, 67 equals 3, and 68 equals 4. So if you have two different non-matching handles with these sorts of pins, there's a 67, just simply swap the pins, and you can figure this out pretty easily, and you will see in just a minute here. So this was me just checking they fit over the key. It's very frustrating that MB no longer make blanks for the keys, leaving us to try and hunt down various options. So, for example, number 1, this is an old school, and number 65, this is a newer school is my belief. They're the same leafs, so they are interchangeable. So if you have those stashes, don't worry about it, just take note of what they are, and you can substitute them accordingly. So number 4 is 68, it's just the same, and so forth. So I've then run into a problem. Here is my ignition key. It does not fit in that lock. In contrast, the provided key is still going in with the leaves out. There is a physical discrepancy between those two locks. Now this is an older one I had spare, and that fits the ignition tumbler key. It does not fit the newer style key, which you can see it doesn't have that guide pin on it. So at this point I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So I decided actually to use the older lock that I had spare, but fit all the internals with new springs and the seal and the lease. I did think about tapping the face off, and I think that's possible. It's just when I gave it a go on another spare, I just found I made a bit of a dog's breakfast, and I decided against that. So what I thought I'd do is just polish up the face of this one, which is acceptable, fit the leaves and springs, and that would get the job done. So clean off all that rubbish around the lip there, because there is a lot of grease and debris build up. The seal fits really nicely. Then what I'm going to do is seal the springs and leaves, and I'm just going to basically duplicate that sequence of leaves which you will have written down after doing your first lock, and then it takes literally like 3 minutes. If you've got all the leaves, you just pop them all in there. So just with the lock and the leaves, I just put some dry lubricant effectively on there. I'll put some in there. I don't know what, I believe this is an acceptable option here. I am not a locksmith. I'm just taking out the old springs. And when I say old springs, this is from the brand new unit. So these are new springs, and you'll see them. They're lovely in gold, in contrast to the ones you'll pull out of the old lock, which look like they've been in the desert for 30 years. So simply pull those springs out, which fit in this small hole. This is, again, relatively straightforward and logical, and I think most of us can achieve this task. I'm not a mechanic, I'm not a locksmith, I just am a hobbyist, and this is all just sort of self-observed knowledge, so we can all do this. So here's the old lock, and you can see the circle where the springs go in. So these done things. If you're like me and your vision's getting a bit worse when you're older, just pay attention to where they're bouncing around. So we're just going to fill them up there. And then you can see how the leaves, the little teeth of the leaves will sit over that, and that's what rebounds these out when there's no key in there. So then we just start to insert the leaves in their known order, because we've already done this on the other side. So we're just going to blaze through this and pop them in there. And just in order, doing one side at a time. So if you flip that over 180 degrees, excuse me, there's another 5 pins to put in from the other side, making 10 total. So there's the first 5. So a bit more of the lubricant goes on. I do the opposite side, fitting the appropriate pins, making sure the other ones aren't flying out. You may wish to start at one end and gradually insert the key as you move away from it to stop them flying out if you can't keep control of that. Again, if you have access to donor handles, that's great, because you just have a few extra pins and things around. I'm sure you can probably get them on eBay on the cheap without keys and things. So there are the 10 pins. They spring out when unloaded because the springs are in there. So fitting my ignition tumbler key, they are all completely flush. And again, if you do not know the sequence of pins, all you do is trial and error. Just put in different pins every time, and if they're flush, that's what you need. So write the sequence down if you are doing a trial and error, which you'll need to do on one of the locks to start with, which I started on my tailgate as noted. Now, I apologize for jumping around, but at this point I decided I actually wanted the old barrel, which has been reprogrammed in the passenger side or left side. So I'm jumping back from the driver's lock to the passenger lock or left side because I just wanted the new one on the driver's or right side. So this is actually reinstalling that one I just rekeyed after having removed the brand new one on it. There's no problems in that. I just felt better having the brand new one on the driver's side, which is the one you'd actually really use. So you can see I've just put that back in. The spring's going in. The 2 teeth there are on the same side at the front, and the legs of the springs have been flicked to opposite sides to help it seat and spring back. Now I push the spring down, and then I put basically my door lock pin over there, and you can see the spring is going forwards, backwards and returning. So in goes the pin for the door lock. The locating pin is initially tapped back in before being clamped down with a bit of grease on it to help it go in. And that concludes the passenger door handle. And I basically then have the brand new lock with the relieved scenario to go and put back in the driver's or right side. So there is the passenger side. The key is doing what it's supposed to do. The tumbler key now goes in and out and turns it forwards and backwards and returns to center. So here is that new lock going into the driver's handle without any problems. So it simply slides in. The 2 teeth are lined up on the front. It's time to place the spring on. I'm just going to flick that other arm over the 2 teeth. And the key for the ignition barrel will now turn that and return to center, which is great. And this is where my second headache came into it, because I've tried to fit the new door lock pin to the old lock, remember, or the old style lock. Although this is the lock with the key that wouldn't fit versus the door pin from the old one. They do not match up because the new door lock had a wider fitting. So if you use the older lock style, you need to use an older lock pin. It's as simple as that. And if you've got a donor, it's very easy just to grab the other one, just put it on the wire wheel and clean it up. But there are two differences there, not just the key, but also the pin, because you can see the darker lock is actually broader. So it doesn't accept the narrower recess of the older style, guys. So it'll make sense if you end up in this dilemma, but if you have a complete lock, you'll be able to interchange appropriately. So I've put the older pin on there after giving it a brush. Here goes the locating pin with a bit of grease. Just crimping it down. It now has the ignition barrel key in there. And here I am at my objective. I now have an ignition tumbler with the 3 keys that were designed for it. This was provided, new old stock. But where it's all at is this key now does the tailgate lock successfully. Okay. Same key. It now does the glove box, which I've also done a video for. There are only 6 pins in that. So that's wonderful. It now does the passenger door handle on the left for an Australian, returning to center. All right. And it also does the driver's or right side for me. So I have 1 key to manage all 5 locks now. I'm very happy. So that's an example of a code, HU7082. I imagine that's Huff, and that's for one of the provided handles that I've bought. That's now superfluous. It does nothing. I imagine once upon a time 7082 went straight back to Mercedes. They looked it up. What's kind of interesting though is that if there were a couple of million 123s made, sounds like there's a lot of combinations recycled. Now it's long since I did maths. Now just concluding, I just sort of briefly show you again, if you have a lock and you do not know the combination of pins you need for the key, for some reason like my scenario, this is an example of a stripped lock. Now all you need to do is make sure the springs are in there. You can start at one end. You don't even actually need to start at one end, but just makes it easier. You're going to put the key in there, and that pin needs to be perfectly flush. Now in this case it is. Alright, it doesn't sit proud. On the other side it would be recessed if it were incorrect. You gradually just work through them. So 1 to 10, having a number of pins available, gradually work through them. Okay, trial and error. And this takes about an hour. From when I did my tailgate lock, again, you can go and look at that video. That's the first one I did, which elaborates on how to figure it out if you do not know the sequence. And it's doable. I would implore you to do it if you've got mismatching locks and keys, because it's very rewarding now to have 1 key to rule them all, so to speak. So you can see how this key is now gradually working through it. They are all perfectly flush. In this case, I know what's going on. I'm just doing it to demonstrate how they're all flush when the key goes in there. And if they didn't, you take them out, and you can figure out, you know, if you had a 1 and it was too, or a 2 and it was too low, I can't remember which way is shorter or higher, but you'll figure it out. And it doesn't take long, and you just work through it until all 10 pins are perfectly flush. That is how it's supposed to be, and that is a working lock. So I hope this is of help to you, and I hope you enjoy a full set of locks with 1 key.